house left by her grandmother. The letter arrived 3 days after Eleanor Whitmore was buried beneath the rain. Elena almost threw it away. The envelope was old-fashioned, sealed with dark wax, and addressed in handwriting she immediately recognized. Thin, elegant strokes, careful loops beneath every letter, her grandmother's writing. For several seconds, Elena simply stood in the narrow hallway of her London apartment, staring at the envelope while traffic hissed through the wet streets outside. That was impossible. Margaret Whitmore had been dead for nearly a week. Elena finally opened the letter with trembling hands. Inside was a single brass key wrapped in black cloth, and beneath it a note. "The house belongs to you now. Do not listen if they sing. No signature. None was needed." Outside, thunder rolled softly over the city. Elena closed her eyes. For years, she had avoided thinking about Ravenshade. Even as a child, the name unsettled her. Ravenshade was not truly a town anymore. It was a fading place, buried between dark forests and a cold northern lake, where winter seemed to last longer than anywhere else in England. Elena had lived there briefly with her grandmother after her parents divorced, but most of those memories existed only in fragments. Rain on old windows, a rocking chair moving by itself, the smell of lake water beneath wooden floors, and singing. Always singing. Her mother never spoke about Ravenshade. Whenever Elena asked questions as a child, her mother would become pale and quiet before saying the same thing every time. Your grandmother was not a good woman. Yet Elena remembered kindness too. Warm blankets beside the fireplace, her grandmother brushing her hair before bed, a soft voice humming lullabies in the dark. That contradiction haunted Elena more than grief itself. The funeral had answered nothing. Nobody cried except Elena. The townspeople stood beneath gray umbrellas, watching the coffin lower into the earth, with expressions that looked disturbingly close to relief. Afterward, an old woman approached Elena beside the cemetery gates. "You shouldn't stay in that house alone," she whispered. Elena frowned politely. "I'm sorry." The woman's watery eyes drifted toward the distant forest. Some things beneath Ravenshade wake easier after funerals. Then she walked away before Elena could respond. Now standing alone in her apartment, with the brass key resting cold in her palm, Elena felt the same unease returning. She should have ignored the letter. Instead, 2 days later, she drove north toward Ravenshade, through endless rain and empty countryside. The farther she traveled, the older the world became. Motorways narrowed into country roads. Villages vanished between hills, wrapped in mist. Ancient forests stretched endlessly beneath low silver skies. By dusk, Elena reached Ravenshade. The town looked exactly like a memory somebody had tried to bury. Narrow stone streets curved between old houses with black roofs and dark windows. The church bell tower leaned slightly toward the lake as though exhausted from surviving another winter. Fog drifted through the roads in pale ribbons. And beyond everything stood the lake. Blackwater Lake. Still, silent, watching. Elena parked outside, the only grocery shop still open. When she entered, conversation stopped immediately. 3 elderly women near the counter stared at her with the same expression people used when recognizing someone from a funeral photograph. The shopkeeper slowly lowered the newspaper in his hands. "You're Margaret's granddaughter." "Not a question." Elena nodded carefully. "I inherited her house." A silence followed. Then one of the old women whispered softly, "God help her." Elena forced a smile. "I used to spend summers there as a child." The shopkeeper's expression darkened slightly. "Did you?" Something about his tone unsettled her. Before she could ask what he meant, another voice came from near the back shelves. A very old woman wrapped in a dark coat stared directly at Elena. "Did your grandmother ever tell you what sleeps beneath that house?" The entire shop went silent again. Elena laughed nervously. "I think you're confusing me with someone who believes ghost stories." The old woman did not smile. In Ravenshade, she whispered, "Ghost stories are usually apologies." Elena left quickly after that. By the time she reached the house, night had fully fallen. The Whitmore house stood alone beyond the edge of town overlooking the lake. A narrow gravel road twisted through dead trees before ending at a large Victorian home surrounded by iron fencing and overgrown gardens. Every light inside was dark. The house looked enormous beneath the storm clouds, and strangely, untouched by time. Elena stepped out of the car slowly. The air smelled of wet wood and lake water. For a moment she simply stared at the house while rain tapped softly against her coat. Something about it felt familiar in the worst possible way. Not welcoming. Recognizing, she unlocked the front door using the brass key. The hinges groaned softly as the house opened before her. Cold air drifted out immediately. The interior remained almost perfectly preserved. Dark wooden floors stretched beneath faded chandeliers. Portraits covered the walls. Old clocks ticked softly throughout the hallway. Elena stepped inside cautiously. "Hello." Her voice disappeared into the silence. No answer came. Yet she could not shake the feeling that somebody had just stopped speaking moments before she entered. She spent the next hour exploring room after room beneath dim electric lights. Dust covered most furniture, but strangely little compared to how long the house had supposedly been empty. Her grandmother's bedroom remained untouched. Books still rested beside the bed. A pair of glasses sat atop a folded newspaper. The indentation in the mattress looked recent. Elena found herself whispering without meaning to. "You should have sold this place." Outside wind moved across the lake. Then came the sound. Soft singing. Elena froze instantly. A woman's voice hummed somewhere deep inside the house. Slow, gentle, a lullaby. The sound seemed to rise through the floorboards themselves. Elena stood motionless, listening carefully. The singing stopped. Her pulse quickened. Hello, nothing. Only the ticking clocks. Elena forced herself to laugh nervously. Old houses made sounds. Pipes echoed strangely. Wind carried noises through vents. That had to be all it was. Still, she locked her bedroom door before sleeping. The bedroom overlooked the lake. Moonlight drifted through thin curtains, while branches scratched softly against the windows outside. Elena lay awake for nearly an hour, staring at the ceiling. Something about the house made silence feel unnatural, as though it were waiting for noise to return. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her toward sleep. Then at exactly 1:13 a.m., she woke abruptly. The singing had returned, this time louder, beneath her. Elena sat upright, slowly. The lullaby drifted upward through the wooden floorboards below her bed, a woman humming softly to a child. The melody felt horribly familiar. Elena climbed from bed carefully and pressed her ear against the floor. The singing stopped immediately. A cold sensation spread through her chest. Then knock. A tiny knock sounded beneath the floorboards. Elena backed away quickly. Another knock followed. Then another, like tiny fingers tapping wood from underneath. Her breathing became shallow. No. The knocking moved slowly across the floor beneath her. Tap, 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 until finally it stopped directly beneath the bed. Silence followed. Then a child whispered softly beneath her. Grandmother Elena stumbled backward in terror. The bedroom lights flickered violently. A child laughed somewhere below the floor. Then everything became still again. For several seconds, Elena could not move. Finally shaking uncontrollably, she grabbed a fireplace poker from beside the bedroom hearth and forced herself toward the bed. Her pulse hammered painfully as she slowly knelt beside it. The darkness underneath looked far deeper than it should have. Empty. At first. Then, two pale eyes opened beneath the floorboards. A small child's face stared up at her through the narrow crack in the wood, smiling. Elena screamed and stumbled backward violently. The lights exploded off. Darkness swallowed the room. And beneath the floor, dozens of children began singing together. The children under the house. Dozens of children began singing beneath the floor. Their voices rose together in the darkness, thin and trembling, as though they were singing from the bottom of a well. The melody was the same lullaby Elena had heard earlier, soft and mournful, but now it filled the entire bedroom. Not one child. Many. Elena stumbled backward until her shoulders struck the wall. The fireplace poker slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a sharp metallic crack. The singing stopped instantly. For one terrible moment, there was only silence. Then small fingers began tapping beneath the floorboards. Tap, 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 all around the room, beneath the bed, beneath the wardrobe, beneath Elena's bare feet. She screamed and ran for the door, fumbling with the lock in the dark. The handle would not turn at first. Her hands were too slick with sweat. Behind her, the floorboards creaked upward, bending slightly, as if something beneath them pressed its palms against the wood. Elena, the voice came from below. A child's voice. Gentle. Familiar. She did not know why it felt familiar. The lock finally gave. Elena burst into the hallway and slammed the door behind her. She ran down the stairs without turning on the lights, gripping the banister so tightly that splinters bit into her palm. In the entrance hall, every clock in the house struck once. 1-1-3. Then all the clocks stopped. By morning, Elena had convinced herself she would leave. She packed her suitcase with shaking hands, while dawn bled gray across Blackwater Lake. The house looked different in daylight, but not safer. Shadows clung too thickly in corners. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch her pass. As she carried her suitcase toward the front door, something fell through the letter slot. A folded paper landed on the floor. Elena froze. No footsteps waited outside. No car had come up the gravel road. She opened the door quickly. The garden stood empty beneath pale morning mist. On the paper was a child's drawing. A house. A black lake. And beneath the floorboards, dozens of small faces looking upward. Elena dropped it. Then she saw the words written on the back, in uneven pencil. "Don't leave us with her." Her breath caught. Her. Not it. Her. Elena stood in the doorway for a long time, staring toward the road that led back to Ravenshade. Every part of her wanted to run, to drive until the town became only a nightmare in the mirror. But the child's face beneath the bedroom floor would not leave her mind. Neither would her grandmother's note. "Do not listen if they sing." Why? Because the children were dangerous, or because they would tell the truth? By noon, Elena was in the town archive behind the church. The building smelled of dust, paper, and cold stone. An elderly clerk named Mr. Wren sat behind a wooden desk pretending not to recognize her. "I need records about missing children," Elena said. His pen stopped moving. "Ravenshade has no such records." "That's not true." Mr. Wren slowly looked up. His eyes were watery but sharp. "Then perhaps you already know more than you should." Elena placed the child's drawing on the desk. His face changed immediately. "Where did you get that?" "My grandmother's house." He pushed the paper back toward her without touching it. "You should burn that. Tell me what happened there." Mr. Wren's jaw tightened. "No." Elena leaned closer. "I heard children under the floor." The silence that followed was absolute. The old clerk looked toward the closed archive door, as though afraid the walls themselves might hear. Then he stood slowly and locked it. When he returned, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Children began disappearing in Ravenshade long before your grandmother was born. One every few years at first. Then more. Always in winter. Always near the lake." Elena's skin went cold. Why wasn't anyone arrested? People were arrested. Strangers. Fathers. Drifters. Teachers. His mouth trembled. It never stopped. He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a thin folder tied with red string. Elise Warren. Age 7. 1968. Thomas Reed. Age 9. 1971. Marion Vale. Age 6. 1975. He placed photograph after photograph on the desk. Children with ribbons in their hair. Children in school uniforms. Children smiling beside birthday cakes. Elena felt sick. Mr. Wren continued. "In the 80s, your grandmother began taking children into her care. After school, during storms. When parents worked late," Elena whispered she was a childminder. "Yes, and they disappeared." His face collapsed with grief. Not immediately. That was the worst part. Parents trusted her. Elena shook her head. "No. My grandmother was strict, but she wasn't. A monster," Mr. Wren said bitterly. "That's what we all wanted to believe, too. That monsters look different from people who offer tea and warm blankets." Elena stood suddenly. "I don't believe you." Mr. Wren reached into the folder and removed one final photograph. It showed Margaret Whitmore as a younger woman standing in front of the house. Around her were at least 20 children. Elena had seen that photo the previous night, but here, uncensored by age and dust, the details were clearer. Some of the children smiled, some looked afraid, and one little girl at the edge of the group stared directly into the camera with Elena's own eyes. Elena's chest tightened. "Who is that?" Mr. Wren did not answer at once. Finally, he said, "Your mother." The word struck Elena hard. "My mother lived there. For a while. She never told me. I imagine she tried to forget." Elena took the photograph with trembling fingers. On the back, someone had written "The Last Good Summer" before the singing got louder. Elena left the archive, carrying the folder beneath her coat. Rain began again as she crossed the churchyard. Near the cemetery gate, the same old woman from the funeral stood beneath a black umbrella. Elena stopped. "You knew my grandmother." The woman smiled sadly. "Everyone knew Margaret. Was she killing children?" The woman's smile vanished. She was feeding something. Thunder rolled softly above the lake. Elena stared at her. "What does that mean?" The old woman stepped closer. "When the lake turns black, the house must be quieted. That is what they used to say. Before Margaret, families chose by lottery." Elena felt the world tilt. Chose what? A child. Elena stepped back. "No." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "You think a town becomes this quiet by accident." Before Elena could speak, church bells began ringing, though no one was in the tower. The old woman looked toward the lake. "Go home, Elena Whitmore, and if your grandmother locked the door, leave it locked." But Elena did not go home immediately. She drove to the nursing facility 2 towns away, where her mother had spent the last years of her life before dying from early dementia. The building kept archived personal belongings for 6 months after death. Elena had never collected them. Inside a cardboard box labeled Anna Whitmore, she found clothes, photographs, a rosary, and a stack of cassette tapes. One tape had her name written across it. "For Elena, if she goes back." Her hands shook as she played it in the car. At first there was only static. Then her mother's voice emerged thin and broken. "Elena, if you're listening to this, then she's dead. And you have the house." A sob caught in Elena's throat. "I wanted to tell you everything," Anne continued, "but memory is a cruel thing. Sometimes forgetting is the only way children survive." Rain streamed down the windshield. "When I was little, I heard them too. Under the floors, in the walls, singing through the pipes. Your grandmother told me not to listen. She said the voices were hungry." The tape crackled, but they weren't hungry. They were afraid. Elena covered her mouth. "Mother kept them beneath the house. Not all of them alive. Not all of them dead. She said it was the only way Ravenshade would survive. She said something under Blackwater Lake had been there long before the church, before the roads, before our name." A long pause followed. Then Anne began crying on the tape. "She tried to give you to it once." Elena stopped breathing. "You were 5. I found you in the cellar, standing before the chained door, singing along with something on the other side. Mother said it had chosen you." The tape hissed. "I took you away that night. I never went back. If you are in that house now, leave before 113. And whatever you do..." Her mother's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "Do not open the chained room." The tape clicked off. Elena sat alone in the car until the sky turned black. When she returned to the Whitmore house, every light inside was on. Through the upstairs windows, small silhouettes moved behind the curtains. Children, waiting. Elena entered with the cassette recorder in one hand and a crowbar in the other. The singing began immediately. Not beneath the floor now. Everywhere. In the walls, behind mirrors, inside the old clocks. Elena walked to the basement door. The air below smelled of lake water and old rot. At the bottom of the stairs, she found the chained room. The door was thick oak wrapped in rusted iron links. Carved into the wood were words she had seen in her childhood nightmares. "Do not let them out." For a moment she heard her grandmother's voice behind her. "Good girls do not open doors that were closed for love." Elena turned. No one stood there. Then from behind the chained door came the whisper of many children. "Please." She raised the crowbar. The first chain broke with a scream of rusted metal. The second snapped. Then the third. The door opened inward. Darkness breathed out. Inside were rows of small iron beds. Dozens of them, each one neatly made. Each one holding a child-sized shape beneath a white sheet. Elena stepped inside, trembling. At the far end of the room, something small moved in the dark. A child's voice whispered, "Grandmother brought us another one." The thing beneath Ravenshade grandmother brought us another one. The whisper came from the far end of the chained room. Elena stood frozen among the rows of small iron beds, the crowbar hanging loose in her trembling hand. The air inside the room was colder than the rest of the house, wet and heavy with the smell of lake water, rusted metal, and old linen. The white sheets on the beds began to move. Not all at once. First one, then another, then all of them. Small shapes shifted beneath the fabric as though children were waking from a long and terrible sleep. Elena backed toward the door. "No," she whispered. "No, I'm not here to hurt you." The child at the far end stepped into the faint light from the hallway. It was a little girl, perhaps 6 years old, wearing a nightdress yellowed with age. Her skin was pale as candle wax. Her eyes were too large, too dark, and full of a sadness that made Elena's fear weaken for a moment. "You have her face," the girl said. Elena swallowed. "My grandmother." The child tilted her head. "The old one." From the beds, other children slowly sat up. Some looked almost normal. Others looked like memories badly preserved. Their faces blurred at the edges. Their fingers faded into shadow. A boy near the wall opened his mouth to speak, but only water spilled out. Elena covered her mouth. "What happened to you?" The children looked toward the floor. Beneath the room, something answered. A deep vibration moved through the house. Not a sound exactly. A hunger. The little girl stepped closer. "She made us sing so it would sleep." Elena felt tears burn her eyes. "What is it?" The child pointed downward. "Ravenshade." The lights in the basement flickered. Suddenly the chained room changed. Elena was no longer standing among beds. She was standing in a memory. The room appeared warm, lit by oil lamps. Children sat in rows, singing the same lullaby. Margaret Whitmore stood near the door as a young woman, elegant and stern, with dark hair pinned behind her head. Beside her stood several townspeople. Mr. Wren, as a younger man. The old woman from the funeral. Parents, priests, shopkeepers, all watching, all silent. On the floor, a black circle had been painted around a wooden trapdoor. The singing grew louder. The trapdoor trembled. Then one child stopped singing and began to cry. Margaret closed her eyes as if something inside her had broken, but she did not stop it. 2 men lifted the crying child and carried him toward the trapdoor. Elena screamed. The memory shattered. She was back in the chained room, gasping. The children stared at her. "They all knew," Elena whispered. The little girl nodded. Everyone knew. Rage rose inside Elena, hot enough to cut through the terror. Her grandmother had not acted alone. Ravenshade had built its peace on small bones and lullabies. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Elena turned. Margaret Whitmore stood in the doorway. Not alive. Not fully dead. She wore the same black dress from the funeral, her silver hair pinned neatly, her face pale and severe. Elena could not breathe. "Grandmother." Margaret looked at the children, and for the first time, Elena saw grief in her eyes. "You opened the wrong door." Elena gripped the crowbar. "You kept children down here. I kept the town alive. You murdered them." Margaret flinched as if struck. "I inherited a bargain, older than my name. Older than this house. Older than the church that pretends it sanctified this place." The house groaned above them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Margaret stepped into the room. "When I was 12, my mother brought me down here and made me listen. The singing beneath the floor, the crying in the walls. She told me Ravenshade survives because someone keeps the thing beneath the lake asleep." Elena shook her head. "So you chose children?" Margaret's expression cracked. "No," she whispered. "Ravenshade chose children. I chose which one suffered longest." The words were monstrous, but the pain behind them was real. Elena remembered the note. "Do not listen if they sing." She understood now. The children sang not because they were evil. They sang because singing was the only thing keeping the thing below from waking fully. Margaret looked toward the little girl. "I tried to make it gentle." The girl stared at her. "You failed." The basement shook violently. A crack split across the floor between the beds. Black water seeped upward through the stone. The children began to sing again, but their voices were weaker now. Elena heard something beneath them, shifting, vast, wet, awake. Margaret turned sharply. "You must close the door." "No. You don't understand what happens if it rises." Elena stepped toward the crack in the floor. "Then tell me." Margaret's eyes darkened. Blackwater Lake is not a lake. It is a mouth. The floor split wider. Cold black water surged upward. In its reflection, Elena saw not her own face, but hundreds of eyes opening beneath the surface. Children's eyes. Adult eyes. Eyes that were not human at all. The house began to sing. Not the children now. The house itself. The walls hummed. Pipes vibrated. Windows trembled in their frames. Upstairs, every clock began striking 113, again and again. Margaret grabbed Elena's arm. "There is still time." One voice can quiet it for years. Elena stared at her. Horror spread through her chest. You were going to give it me. Margaret did not deny it. When you were little, it chose you. Your mother took you before the rite was finished. Elena pulled away. You were my grandmother. I was the keeper of Ravenshade. No, Elena said, tears falling now. You were a coward who let a town call murder survival. The words broke something. Not in Margaret. In the house. The black water erupted through the floor. Beds overturned. Children screamed. Margaret was thrown backward against the wall. Elena grabbed the little girl's hand. It felt cold and impossibly light. Run. The children moved with her, not as bodies, but as shadows, memories, voices. They surged from the chained room and up the basement stairs as the house twisted around them. The hallway above had changed. The walls were wet. Portraits cried Blackwater. Tiny hands pressed from beneath wallpaper. Elena ran toward the kitchen where she had seen an old oil cabinet. Behind her, Margaret screamed her name. Not with anger, with terror. Elena, if it wakes, it will follow every voice that ever fed it. Elena found the oil tins beneath the sink. Her hands moved without thinking. She poured oil across the hallway, across the sitting room, across the staircase. The children gathered near the front door, trembling in the flickering lights. The little girl watched her. Will it hurt? Elena's throat closed. I don't know. Margaret appeared at the end of the hall, soaked in black water, her ghostly face twisted with grief. Fire won't kill it. Elena struck a match. No, she whispered, but maybe it will stop the singing. For the first time, Margaret looked afraid of her. Then Elena dropped the match. Fire ran across the floor like golden breath. The house ignited instantly. Flames swallowed the hallway, climbing curtains, devouring portraits, rushing toward the basement door. The house screamed with the voices of children and old women, and something ancient beneath stone. Elena opened the front door. The children passed through her like cold wind. One by one, free. The little girl stopped beside her. What was your name? Elena asked. The child smiled sadly. Anne knew me. Then she vanished into the rain. Elena understood. Her mother had known this child, had maybe loved her, had carried the memory all her life. Margaret stood inside the burning hallway, surrounded by flame. For a moment she looked like the woman from Elena's childhood, the one who brushed her hair, the one who tucked blankets around her shoulders. I tried to save you, Margaret whispered. Elena looked at her through tears. You should have saved them. The ceiling collapsed. Elena ran into the storm. Behind her, the Whitmore house burned against the black sky, its windows blazing like open eyes. The townspeople gathered along the road, silent beneath umbrellas, watching their secret turn to ash. No one tried to stop it. No one called the fire brigade. At dawn, only smoking ruins remained above Blackwater Lake. The lake itself had turned perfectly still. Months passed. Elena left Ravenshade and never returned. She moved to a small apartment in Edinburgh, where the streets were loud enough to drown out old memories. She changed her phone number. She burned every photograph of the house except one, a picture of her mother as a child standing beside a little girl whose name Elena never learned. For a while, life became almost normal. Then, one night in winter, Elena woke at exactly 1:13 a.m. The room was silent. Then came a sound beneath the floor, soft singing, a child's lullaby. Elena sat up slowly, her blood turning cold. A tiny knock came from below. Tap, tap, tap. Then a child whispered through the boards, "We followed you home."